Hello, everyone. I'm back with the Session 5 teaching memo portion of this. I'm going to talk about our discussion board that just ended, the Harder Than the Dickens. So I'm always a little sad when this closes because it really gets my students to examine the pros and cons of large-scale tests. It also ferrets out the difference between norm and criterion reference tests. Those are vocabulary in your own words, so make sure you know those. Many people rail against norm reference tests like the SAT and the GRE, and in most cases rightfully so, because they're created to sort and separate, much like the original IQ tests were created to separate officers and enlisted men in the Army. People that use them want to be able to distinguish between test takers to make their selection process easier. So if you're a college admissions person, you can just glean off these kids here, these students, these applicants, because they didn't get a certain score. So it makes it easy for them. Our state assessments, on the other hand, are criterion reference tests based on our standards, on the Common Core standards. Theoretically, everyone could get all of the questions correct. They are not made to create a spread, they're only to distinguish between those who know the material and those who don't. Much like the select response test that you're going to create in starting this week. Several of you read my short article, How Standard is Standardized Testing. In it, I described the efforts of my friend, who is now my wife, and her efforts to accommodate her testing situation according to her own learning style. The point I was trying to make was how far we have to take standardization, making sure everyone takes the test in the same way. Christina commented that teacher-made tests are better than large-scale tests. And Christina's not alone in feeling that way. Teachers have a little ego invested in creating their own test. But she said they're better because teachers can design their tests based on their students' abilities and learning styles. I believe this is a very big misconception, because if you start changing your tests based on what you think your students know or their abilities, you will be doing them a disservice, and you will never be able to answer one of the three big questions. And if you remember those questions, where am I going, where am I now, and how can I close the gap, you won't be able to know where they are now. You will just base your test on where you think they are, and that's not good. So I just want to emphasize that. Can we modify environmental preferences without damage the overall integrity of the exam? Angela felt this was a good idea, and I think so as well. With the coming of computer adaptive testing, we may see the large-scale test assessments embedded into the curriculum, taken when students are ready. So we're not putting aside hours and hours for testing and losing out on instructional time. Already, state ed is allowing everyone extra time to finish the assessments. Can more accommodations be on the way? This could be a start. I have to give a shout out to Jacqueline, who, after reading my article, told a story about her students and how she taught them the difference between fair and equal when they questioned why some students were receiving accommodations. While all of them did not get it, she noticed that many of her students acted differently toward each other. She said the picture I have inserted below, one that I have used often in this course to explain the need for accommodations. Again, Jacqueline demonstrated the principle that if you want your students to behave in a certain way, you have to teach them. And so congratulations to you, Jacqueline, for noticing that. There was some conversation about the reading levels of the state assessments being too hard for many children. In another course, I shared an article, and I'll click on that just to give you an idea of what it looks like, that discussed the Common Core assessments and can special education students keep up with the Common Core. And many of you felt it was unfair. What you need to understand is that most students with disabilities have average or above average intelligence. The negative effect of low expectations for these students can be devastating. In the article that I'm sharing here, the special ed teacher stated, a couple of years ago, I would have never tried such a difficult passage with these kids. My students are stepping it up and showing some unexpected successes. And this is why we expect all students to master the standards. So keep that in mind when you think that if you're teaching special ed kids, they shouldn't be taking these assessments, because they should. Several of you discussed how teachers should become involved in creating our state assessments. Now that Pearson is out of the picture, Questar, in partnership with state ed, are now soliciting teachers to become involved in all aspects of the test creation process, including item writing, which Pearson would not allow teachers to do when they were involved. In several posts, I shared this letter, which is posted on the state ed website, which I'll pull up right here, that talks about greater teacher involvement in the test development process. So click on that and you can see how you can get involved in the creation of our state assessments. So I hope you found this discussion board worthwhile. I certainly felt it was. I will be back to talk about session 6 and our assignments and the beginning of our test creation process.